And here we are. A little ambiance music. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the AMA. This is Balaji, the Community Engagement Manager from DBT Labs. It's day 30 for me, so I'm brand spanking new. Excited for everyone to be here. We are going to have a fun time today. We've got hanging out with us in this AMA, the Jason Ganz from. Jason, where are you from today? You got to say it.
Coming to you today from Brooklyn, New York, Balaji.
It's so bad. It only gets worse, people. No, we're gonna have fun on this Halloween day. We got Jason, our senior manager of developer experience at DBT Labs, and we were supposed to have
We lost
Drew
Drew.
Banin. I.
There he is.
Oh,
Hey everybody.
what's going on, Drew?
Hey,
From
I'm
the
stuck in a
city of
spreadsheet.
brotherly love. What is your costume,
Brotherly
Drew?
love. I'm trapped inside of this spreadsheet. I can't get out. I've been trying all day, but I'm trapped in here.
This only
Yeah.
works with a group of data professionals, but you all can appreciate you all can appreciate that. Drew's one of our esteemed co-founders at DBT Labs. Everybody knows Drew, and for those of you guys that were in Vegas for Coalesce, hopefully you got to meet both of these gentlemen as well. I've got to shout out my colleague Amada Echeverria. She typically hosts these community AMAs, and she's handing the baton over to me. So thank you, Amada, for getting us prepped. Today, we are going to talk all things DBT. You folks sent some wonderful questions in about Copilot, about AI, data careers. We want to talk about it all. We're having a live discussion right now in Slack. So go to the channel DBT-community-AMA. That's DBT-community-AMA. Post more questions in there. Let us know what you're doing for Halloween. And actually, let's stick with that theme. Let's roll with that. So we got to talk Halloween movies, scary movies. I know I got some Halloween aficionados here, some horror movie aficionados. Jason, Gaz, let's start with you. What are you watching? What's a classic scary movie for you?
Okay, so I am too much of a scaredy cat for real scary movies. I know people like real scary movies. I like like the old timey like 90s and 2000s scary movies that were like kind of funny, like a Scream or a Final Destination, where it's like, okay, I'm not actually gonna get too scared.
Yes. No, I can dig it. I like that. Weirdly enough, I never got too much into horror movies myself. Having said that, I have binged the entire season of The Walking Dead, 10 seasons of The Walking Dead. So go figure. Drew, what's on tap for you when it comes to scary movies?
Yeah, I'm not a big scary movie person either. And when I watch them, I kind of like cover my eyes a little bit. I hate being jump scared. I think that Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, if you think about it, it's kind of like they're trick-or-treating in there. I'd say that's my favorite Halloween movie.
Great. No, that's great. That's awesome. This is great. Well, hey, everyone, as you all are rolling in, thank you for being here. We're doing these every month, just hanging out. It's super informal. You get to spend time with some of the voices and some of the faces behind DBT Labs. You see us in Slack all the time. So now we actually get to hang out a little bit. And we really want to hear from you also. So you all put in the chat, what are you watching on Halloween and what are your plans for the evening? Now, before we really get going, I want to talk a little bit about Coalesce 2024. This was my very first Coalesce. I was 2 weeks in on the job, got to fly all the way to Vegas and meet my coworkers the same time you all were meeting them. So it was a very, very special experience for me. If you were at Coalesce, I want to know, let us know in the chat that you were there live. And by the way, we'd love to know where everyone is hailing from right now. Gans is in Brooklyn, New York. Drew is in Philadelphia, and I'm in North Carolina, all based in the US. So let's talk Coalesce. Drew, this was your fourth Coalesce, I think it was.
Maybe fifth. Could have been fifth.
Ooh.
Two online, two in person than this one, I think.
Nice. I was impressed first by the scale of this darn thing. Over 2,000 attendees live, maybe 7,000 online. This was a massive undertaking, and yet I was able to have a lot of small interactions, meet a lot of people from all over the world. I want to hear your thoughts, Drew, on the evolution. We didn't start at 2,000 attendees, I don't think. Where did this whole thing start, and what's changed from then till now?
Sure. Well, the first Coalesce we did was online, and I think we planned for it to be in person originally, and then the COVID pandemic broke out. So we had to shift and make it an online event instead. And that one was pretty cool because it was December. There was it was not safe to go outside. And so everyone was happy to be inside watching Coalesce talks, for a week straight. And I think we set up the time zones so that we could have talks from people in the US and Australia and that slice of the world and Europe too. So that was a really special Coalesce, being the first one. Definitely not how we thought it would go when we started planning the event, but it is a really special one to me just because of that moment that we were all kind of in together.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody remembers where they were March of 2020. And it's funny. So I didn't get to attend until this most recent one, but a lot of my quarantine was staying home with the family. The first 3 months, my partner and I, we've got a couple of kids. First 3 months, we were like the model family, board games every night, long walks with the family, cooking meals, all sitting at the dinner table. 12 months in, we're all in separate rooms on our devices all day, don't want to see each other, may or may not be wearing pajamas for multiple days straight. So, quarantine was quite the experience for everyone. But Gans, what was Coalesce like for you landing in Vegas this go around? And how did it compare to previous years?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a great question. So I was an online attendee at that first 2020 Coalesce, not working for DBT Labs. And I remember the first Coalesce was this singular event because it was getting everyone together, kind of from from across the DBT community, all of these talks that were kind of building up the ideas that had been brewing in the DBT community for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a phase shift. It's something is different after this Coalesce, particularly the first one. And I've loved every Coalesce, and no one could ever accuse me of being insufficiently enthusiastic about DBT. So take it as you will. But I felt that this Coalesce was kind of another phase shift in a way that I haven't felt it in a while, in the sense that it was just the ability to have the interesting community energy, the product launches, feeling like we are really excited about kind of the next set of releases out there, and hearing it from everyone on the ground, some of the people in this chat. It felt like this year we were going and we were bringing the next level of kind of energy to the DBT product and to the DBT community. Vegas was interesting. I loved all of our different locations. There was always something really special to me about the first in person in New Orleans. That was a really great location. But the great thing about Vegas is it's just so well set up to have conferences. So we were able to just have events that were pretty seamless. People could get into them. The venues were big enough, and so we could focus on what we actually wanted to focus on, which is talking to each other, making connections, seeing our old friends and new friends in the data community. So yeah, it was great. It was a awesome Coalesce. And to those of you that joined us, those of you that were speakers or engaged in any way, thank you so much. It was a really special one.
Speaking of engaged, we got Bruno on the line. What's up, Bruno? Bruno got engaged just before Coalesce and walked the floor with his lovely fiance the whole week. It was a pleasure to meet them both. Really great to meet Bruno. He was also honored with one of our community awards as well. He is just a lighthouse in the DBT community. So thank you for being here, friend. And Jenna as well. Great to see you, Jenna, my friend. I hope all is well. Hope you guys are recovering from all of the inclement weather that we've been having in North Carolina. All right, so Drew, I want to get your take before we get into some of the technical questions. I want to get your take. Someone did send this question about the community. In particular, they wanted to know what some of your favorite internet spaces are and what made them feel like a community. The reason this is such a timely question is because we're just coming from Coalesce. Those of us who were fortunate to attend live, we still have all the feels. There's something so special about being shoulder to shoulder with people that you have so much in common with. But this idea of the community that's driving DBT, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and maybe your thoughts on some other communities that you felt inspired by.
Yeah, sure. I remember years and years and years ago, maybe 4 years ago, Emily Shario, prominent early member of the DBT community, said this line like, all of us are smarter than any of us. And to me, it's always been this encapsulation of what community is all about and why it matters so much. So I think like analytics engineers, whether you consider that a job title or a job description, are people that are probably solving similar types of problems in maybe totally different domains or different size companies. But the work that you're doing, I think at a very small company or a very big company is pretty similar. And so our ability to sort of learn from each other about what works, what doesn't work, things we could try out is kind of how collectively we advance the field of data and analytics. So I think community is a huge part of what we're doing. I think it's not like some settled matter where I don't know. I remember Ben Stansel wrote about this a while ago, but like, the community of medical device repair professionals or something like that. One of his Friday Substacks. So it's like, okay, that's a well-established field, and maybe it changes a little bit here and there. But I don't know. For us, I feel like data is evolving in real time, which is pretty cool. Wait, I want to say a couple other things so quick. This might sound like a non sequitur, but as I was saying that last sentence, it reminded me of a conversation I had in the elevator at Coalesce. There was like a food and beverage conference happening, either in the same hotel or a different hotel in Vegas. And I remember thinking like, how much is there to talk about like food and beverages, like new Fritos, But, as I was talking to some of these people in the elevator, they said something to me like, well, data, like what is there to talk about? It's just numbers, right? So anyway, that's like a bit of perspective that I feel like I have now, which is like a lot of these fields are deep and community is important everywhere.
That's actually really profound. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I signed up for Blue Sky 2 days ago. I'm having a great time. There's a lot of data folks on Blue Sky. If you're not on there, hashtag data BS, as Jenna says. It's been popping off this week. You should join us.
Yes, everyone join us on Blue Sky. It's been really fun there.
That is a great share. Let's go ahead and put that in the Slack channel as well. DBT-community-AMA. And let's see if we can get a little momentum going there. So there's a question that we put out in the chat just now. Someone did mention is that Jakob, if please correct me if I pronounce that incorrectly. The Mr. Olympia conference happening at the same time during Coalesce. Coincidence or no? Drew, maybe you can say. I have to say, considering it was my first Coalesce, for about 24 hours, I was feeling pretty inadequate and feeling like, man, these DBT folks are really in shape. Until someone pointed out it was a totally separate conference. I felt a little bit better about myself. But yes, that was impressive to see those folks out there.
Yeah, you got to dedicate your life to that, I think. So props to them for following their dreams. I think that's awesome.
I love it. I love it. We're going to talk as we transition into more data-specific topics. We actually want to talk about spooky data stories. So
Hmm.
DBT Labs came out with a wonderful. They come out with an annual. We come out with an annual report, the state of analytics engineering every year, and it was insightful. It was really intriguing for me to see some of the things that data professionals are struggling with now. Those things are actually evolving as we've been going through this current era of the analytics engineering profession. But I'd love to hear maybe a spooky data story, a scary data story that some of you all have been through. And Gans, I'll tap you first simply because I actually heard one of your stories. You shared this on stage a little bit about back in 2017 when it was board, board
Yes.
report season, and there were some last minute demands coming in to you from the board to create a whole bunch of different reports. That sounded pretty scary. Maybe you could share that story and maybe connect the dots to how things have evolved since then.
That was spooky, and I absolutely want to get to that story. But if we're talking about spooky data stories, this just
Yes.
reminded me from around the same era. I wrote about this in the roundup a couple years ago. I spent 3 months of my life convinced that my data warehouse was haunted because we had we were doing some truly atrocious things to get revenue tracking off of our event stream data. And it involved a lot of manual data loads. I'm not going to go exactly into what we were doing, but what we saw was, okay, so we had revenue kind of like associated to each account. So say there's 10 customers, each with a certain amount of revenue. What was happening was the revenue was getting moved from one account. So it would take, like, say, customer 2. It would take all of their revenue and associate it to customer 3. So then customer 3 would have the revenue from customer 2 and 3. And it would be like that for a couple of days. And customer 2 would be zeroed out. So it would be nothing. There'd be no revenue. And then, like, without us being able to, like, know or predict when this happened, it would move again. And so all of that revenue would move to customer 7, and then customers 2 and 3 were zeroed out. And
Nice.
this was destroying my life. It honestly, like, it was keeping me up late at night. Like, we called it the ghost account, and like we never knew when it was going to move or why it was going to move or what was happening until eventually we had to do like a manual export of all of our data log. I spent probably like a fortunate number of hours just going through our IP address aliasing data, and then much like in Scooby-Doo, it wasn't actually a ghost. So you pull the mask off the ghost, and in fact, the issue was that we were aliasing together every device that someone was using to say, so like Logi, if you were using your laptop and your iPad and your phone, we would want to connect those together and say that that's all part of you and you're all part of customer 7. But what we didn't realize was we were also aliasing it when our customer support was going in to make changes to people's account. So because our customer support people were touching all of these different accounts on their devices, anytime they would go in to like do some manual admin on a customer's account, that would cause the ghost account to move. So we performed an exorcism known as excluding our own company office IP address from the IP address aliasing, and the ghost account went away. And that is my personal most spooky data story.
That sounds horrible.
It's pretty spooky.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Drew, do you have one for us?
I do. I hope my Wi-Fi is holding up okay. I'm not breaking up too much. I was doing consulting. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And again, similar to your story, I thought that the table was haunted because the data analyst I was working with called me over and said, Drew, every time I run this identical query, I keep getting different results. So it's like, how can this be? So we look at it together, and this person's querying a view, and we check out the view, and that looked fine. And then we're trying to figure out, like, is the data changing out from under us? Is something loading new data in a surprising way? But it turns out we followed the chain of views, and 4 or 5 views deep in the DAG there, somebody left order by random limit 1,000 in their like a CTE or something. And so every time you ran the query, it re-executed with a random subset of data, and we were just looking at aggregation. So it was like, it's 0, now it's 75, now it's 2 million, depending on which 1,000 records got pulled. So that was spooky, and it gave me a healthy fear of putting order by and limit statements. Actually, order by is fine, but the limit statement is killer if you leave it in a DBT model.
I love it. I love it. I love it. This is actually, thank you for that, Drew. This is actually maybe a little bit reminiscent of some of the challenges, the inconsistencies that tools like AI might be able to start help us solve. I don't want to jump the gun, but this topic of artificial intelligence, generative AI, and being able to use that to do things like write code is one that's fraught. It's got all this potential, but people have a lot of concerns. People have questions, is the AI going to replace my job? Can I trust it? Is it going to do all the exciting things? Maybe we could get into that a little bit. Drew, you've got this really wonderful sort of phrasing or framing about the cost of creation.
Oh, yeah.
And is a quote from Martin, I think, one of our investors. Could you maybe share that a little bit to help us understand how we could think about generative AI and data?
Totally. It's such a cheat code for me because anytime I want to sound smart, I just repeat something I heard Martin Casado say, and everyone thinks I'm smart, but really, like, I didn't come up with this. So yeah, Martin Casado framed it to us, I think, what at our company on site there in Cancun earlier this year. And what Martin said is the microchip has reduced the marginal cost of computation to 0, and the internet has reduced the marginal cost of distribution to 0, and generative AI is reducing the marginal cost of creation to 0. And the way that I think about that is just like, you can make stuff with computers faster and cheaper and more easily than really ever before. So, there were like digital drawing apps, and if you were talented with a stylus, you could draw, incredible things with digital tools. But it's such a step change difference to be able to type in natural language what you want and then see a picture and say, no, not quite like that. I actually meant like this, and then see a different picture. So, you in the setup here, you said, like, is AI going to take all of our jobs? And I'd like to think that the answer to that is no, but who knows? Ultimately, we can maybe discuss it. That'd be interesting. But right now, I think that people are realizing that you can leverage AI to do things that you couldn't do yourself in the past. And that's really powerful and enabling. And it helps creative people do things that they could like envision, but not actually like physically manifest in the world historically, at least not with paying someone to do it and taking a lot of time or energy or talent. So as a talentless person without a lot of time, I'm grateful for AI image generation. Let me say that.
That's pretty funny. Obviously, you're not talentless. Even your drawing of the dogs playing cards, I thought was imaginative. I'll give you that. It was imaginative. And actually, I started playing, for example, with this Gen AI tool called Midjourney about a year ago, and just sort of creating different images. It is fascinating because initially you get started, and what you're asking the tool to do might be fairly rudimentary. But then as you see the results it can create, then you start to refine, and you could actually start to build skill in terms of how you use the tool. So that's been a revelation to me.
Yeah, most definitely. And, it's one of these things where even 6 or 12 months ago, you had to be like pretty thoughtful about how you wrote prompts. And I don't know, Gaines, you're closer to this world than I am, but like people seem to be talking a lot less about prompt engineering today than they were 12 or 18 months ago, right? Like you can kind of just type whatever and you'll get pretty close. And then, okay, maybe it's still relevant a little bit, but not like it was, right?
Well, it's really interesting because like I think of like prompt engineering as like a separate discipline. People have been talking about that a lot less, but like the thing that is actually really important is being able to frame the problem really well and crisply. But like I think that the interesting thing is you kind of frame it like you would for it. It's like the skill of framing a problem for a person less so than the skill of framing a problem for a computer, right? And like much of coding is how do you frame a problem very well for a computer. But for
Yes.
this, it's like how do you actually like it's like much more like writing a very very good README than it is like writing code, and like being able to like think through the edge cases. I'm actually kind of like brought back to your to the like the dangers of limits in DBT models, because it's like it's fun and interesting once to do the investigation and realize feeling of like why is this crazy thing happening in my DBT model, and go through and realize that someone stuck a limit in there when you weren't expecting it. But if that starts happening regularly, it very quickly goes from fun and interesting to this is a complete waste of the like brief and precious life that I was put here on Earth for. And so like what I'm
Yeah.
really excited about for AI tooling is like we still need, you know, for the time being, and like I'm going to get out of kind of like esoteric takes here, but like I've communicated those elsewhere. But like we still need to have humans and have us be the ones that are figuring out, you know, like what we want the rules in our projects to be. But like you're actually just gonna have to spend so much less time doing something for the fifth time and the 12th time and the like 376th time, because like, you know, hopefully there's a future where we can specify a list of things about our DBT projects that are, you know, this is already, we already do this in linting, but it'd be like more advanced things like be really careful, like you should be very careful about allowing limits in DBT models and raise this as a potential error if you see it, and then it'll like, you know, help prevent us from having to go and track those track those down again.
Totally random example.
That's it.
I love it. I actually heard, I don't remember which of you gentlemen had used this phrase in one of your presentations, but you talked about the ability for AI and DBT Copilot in particular to automate the mundane. To automate the mundane. And a lot of times, you know, speaking about some of these fears that some of us have about AI, we think about it automating the most specialized, most creative, most strategic parts of our work. What's your take on this framing of AI automating the mundane so that we can be freed up, not just to have more time, but to actually solve higher level problems?
Yeah, this is one of the things I talked about in my Coalesce talk. And I think that is the, let me say, like lowest hanging fruit for AI tooling is just, as you say, automating the mundane. Things that you can kind of do with your brain on autopilot, but like something historically needed to move the mouse and click the buttons and type and press enter, right? Like process oriented stuff. I think what's kind of cool about LLMs is you can define these processes in natural language. And okay, depends on the use case, a lot of caveats we can supply, but for the most part, like LLMs can kind of do this stuff if you can have some sort of LLM interface into the thing. And I just saw the Claude demo. I think it was from Anthropic, right? Where they do like computer use. So, okay, that's taking it a step even further, like use existing tools to automate actions. And anyway, when I think about my headphones died, I have to switch headphones. I'll keep talking though. But if you say anything, I won't hear you. Okay. When I think about automating the mundane, it's just like a lot of opportunity to do those higher leverage things that require, you know, a body of knowledge either from the organization or from previous roles about the best way to approach some problem. And that's what I think a lot of us aspire to do, is like have a lot of leverage and do important things, you know, at work.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Audio back. Can you hear us, Drew?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gans, were you going to add something there?
Yeah, well, so it's just interesting to talk about like, what makes work strategic, and is this going to like leave the creative or strategic parts of work? But like the thing that comes up for me there is that like the creative and strategic parts of this work are kind of like definitionally the ones where kind of like it requires being able to take the existing tooling and kind of like figure out how to maximally use it to solve the set of problem spaces that are available to you. So like even in a world where like what the ways that we apply kind of creativity or strategy would change, like the thing that's definitely not going to change is like we're going to be able to need to take the entire basket of kind of like tools and socio-technical systems available to us and apply those creatively and strategically to solve problems. And like that feels to me like a relatively fundamental thing that like would be very difficult to imagine not being the case any longer.
Right. That's good stuff. All right. I want to hop to a question that's been asked by one of our live members. This is David Dumas. Thanks for hanging out with us here, David. David asked a couple of questions. The most recent one, and we'll see if we can answer this question here. If not, David, I'll follow up with you in Slack and make sure we get you everything that you need. But David is asking, he says he's got multiple Snowflake instances and would like to source data from more than one of them. Data shares are limiting. Other ETL tools like Talent and Matillion allow for multiple connections. So he's asking whether this could be a new DBT feature to have multiple connections.
Yeah. So let me start off by saying this is really cool because it kind of reminds me of the old NPR segment, Car Talk. And I think that it'd be great if people could write in with their data warehouse problems. Yeah, Gans and I can diagnose them. So bring them on. That's what I'm saying. David, what I would point you to is some of our new announcements around Iceberg support that we talked about at Coalesce. I would need to know a little bit more about what exactly you're trying to do and why exactly data shares are limiting. But if you're trying to share across Snowflake instances, maybe one option is to store data in Iceberg format in your own blob data store and then query that from multiple different places. Not sure if that fits the bill or not. We can totally follow up on Slack with you.
Appreciate that, Drew. And thank you for asking that question as well, David. David has another question, which is a bit more technical. David, what I'll request so that we can make sure we answer that completely, let's go ahead and post that same question in Slack, and then we'll make sure we get you a very detailed answer to that. Jenna, thank you for asking. Yes, we're going to make sure we get to the questions in Slido as well. So we appreciate that. One of the Slido questions was about ethics in AI. We've talked about AI quite a little bit. I'm not sure if we really went too deep on the ethics side of the house. Do either of you gentlemen have any thoughts on that topic? It's a fairly broad one.
Is there the topic just riff on the topic of ethics in AI, or is there a specific question?
It wasn't specific, so it was just sort of general.
Yeah.
And I know ethics in AI comes up a lot when it comes to areas like content creation. In the space of data, I'm not experienced enough to be able to have an opinion on that. I don't know whether you guys have run into the question yet.
Totally. So Gans, how about you want to go first? Do you want to go first? It looks like you have some more things to say.
You sound like you got something.
I don't want to monopolize the chat. If you want to go for it.
No, go for it.
Okay, here's what I would say. I think we have to break down ethics and AI into sort of different pieces that are each uniquely interesting to talk about. But I'll tell you the ones I'm most familiar with are, first of all, this idea of like data governance. So what are you using data for? Is it appropriate? Do you have permission to use that data in that particular way? And I think one of the big potential failure modes as AI is concerned is with natural language interfaces into, a data warehouse. I think that if you know what SQL query you're running and you're reasonably familiar with the database, you can sort of identify different tables and where the data came from, what it's appropriate to use it for and not. If you are not technical or not familiar with the data warehouse and you're asking questions, say in English, and getting data answers back, and then taking those answers and running with them, it's very possible that if the permissions weren't set up correctly, or depending on the SQL query was written by an LLM, you could be doing something like inappropriate or immoral or illegal. So that's where I would point to things like our semantic layer, not as a magic wand that solves all of your governance problems, but as a way to ensure that the data you expose to the organization via natural language interfaces is fit for consumption for specific and guided use cases.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Ganz, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo Drew when Drew was saying this is like incredibly large and multifaceted topic. There are kind of across the globe government, academic, industry conversations, conferences dedicated to this very thing. It's a fascinating, very complex topic, and I don't think that we could even begin to scratch the surface of the beginning of how to talk about kind of like AI and ethics overall. So what we can do is kind of like share information about like a little sliver of it that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, which like going alongside Drew is like, how do we actually control access to data? How do you manage which data goes into systems? Like, these are actually problems that people have been working on for a long time, and there's a tremendous amount of kind of like existing like body knowledge and research and technology in them. So to the extent that we can, as we are leveraging AI, also think about kind of like what are the best practices that we have already created kind of for data, for deploying technological systems, all these things. It's like what is a question, like almost farcically simple question I ask all the time is like, what's the same and what's different? So it's like, what is the same with this, and what are the things that we have like as a society or as an industry figured out before, and how do we make sure that those continue, and what's different? So what are the new challenges going to be? How do we make sure to identify them before they arise, and how do we create kind of like the structure, the system, the guardrail to have those conversations and make sure that we are deploying this in a safe, effective, and kind of large scale beneficial for everyone manner.
I like it.
Can I give you like a thought leadership answer that's a step farther removed from DBT and data warehouses?
Let's do it.
Okay. I think that LLMs are going, and things in this vein, are going to cause us to have like an ethics crisis. In that, I remember taking an ethics class, like computer ethics, I think it was called, in college, and we surveyed Western ethics through the ages. And I took a philosophy 101 class where we read Plato's Republic, and we talked about like ethics, at least a little bit, through that lens. And never before in human history have there been machines that were capable of making decisions to the extent that LLMs can make decisions. Or I know this is not LLMs exactly, but drive cars, or you could imagine like do other things that were historically human-only endeavors. And I think that specifically as a species, we're going to have a pretty hard time with the concepts of like blame and fault and liability. For better or for worse. Maybe that's an American perspective I'm sharing with you, and European audiences will disagree. But I think that we as a species are wired to think about like justice, virtue in terms of like fault and liability and obligation. And none of this applies to large language models. So I think it's actually going to be very hard for us to understand what to do about it as a species.
I agree with that, and I'm going to assign homework actually for anyone in the audience that is interested in these topics, which is actually go and think of some questions here that you care about on this topic that are interesting to you, and then spend 1 full hour writing about them back and forth with the new Claude 3.5 Sonnet model, which is kind of like it is the most in-depth model in terms of kind of like being able to discuss these things. I'm not telling you what to think about the results of what you get out of there or how you feel about it. I'm saying spend an hour engaging with it and then let me know what you found, because I found it's just, it's a really fascinating piece of technology that I think none of us have like fully wrapped our minds around.
And Ganz said he doesn't like watching horror movies. Somehow that sounded very, very sinister. But I like it. I will, a challenge accepted. I'm definitely going to jump into that. That's good. Let me get to some of the questions that our guests have asked us here. Here's a good one. Will 2025 be the year of the semantic layer? And what do you think needs to change with DBT's SL to further adoption?
So I imagine we're saying calendar year 2025, not fiscal year 25, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not funny. Yeah, it's also the year of Linux on the desktop too. I wouldn't look at like, is it the year of the semantic layer? I think that different companies are finding that they need this kind of stuff for different reasons. So I can tell you that we're seeing a lot of interest for sort of embedded analytics use cases in product reporting. I think that's been steady for a while now, but I think it's starting to pick up even more. I think there's like sort of the classic BI, trusted data, precise, consistent, everywhere you access data, including like places like Excel and Google Sheets, and that continues to be relevant. It was sort of the original vision. And I think that probably the new thing is semantic layer for AI. And I would just point to this idea of like, a lot of people are experimenting with getting LLMs to generate SQL to answer business questions, written in natural language. And I'm open to being wrong about this, but my personal belief is that it is extremely risky to ask an LLM to generate SQL for you and then run that SQL and then believe the results. I think it's equivalently risky to ask a human being to write SQL for you. Like, human beings are fallible too. But I think there are better guardrails around the ways in which human beings tend to be fallible. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to get too long-winded there, but semantic layers really, really help here because they serve as the sort of backend for your query. The LLM's job is to translate your question into a semantic layer query, not an arbitrarily complicated SQL query that is, denser, impenetrable, or hard to verify. Yeah, I think it's the new thing happening that we're seeing right now, the semantic layer world.
These are juicy topics, man. I feel like we could spend an hour on a lot of these topics. Really, really good questions. Here's another question. What's next when it comes to further enabling hybrid mesh?
Like DBT mesh?
Ooh. They don't elaborate, but I'll assume they're talking about DBT mesh.
Okay. So yeah, I would say that. Okay, Gins.
We published a blog recently on specifically hybrid mesh, talking about the ability to use core and cloud together. So this was a really interesting finding that, as we've been talking to companies over the past year, for a long time, one of the things we've been saying is like, people and organizations have different needs, and sometimes like it's actually really beneficial for there to be certain parts of an organization that are using DBT core and some parts that they're using DBT cloud. And so we published a blog just before Coalesce on the hybrid mesh, which is the idea that you can actually use DBT mesh. DBT mesh is a product functionality within DBT that allows you to use different DBT projects together. You can actually use that to connect your teams using core and cloud together so that they can work together and kind of share data and collaborate across each other, so that like everyone has access to the tools they need and the systems they need. So that to me is like part of the one DBT theme that we were talking about at Coalesce, which is just like a realization that they're like DBT is a global scale technology at this point. People are using it for all different kinds of workloads. specific next steps for hybrid mesh, there are conversations. We had some great suggestions from Jenna about kind of ways that we could further enable the functionality of hybrid mesh. So definitely we're looking at a number of options, and expect to hear more of us soon on the hybrid mesh front. And then I think, Drew, you were going to talk more about kind of like larger mesh.
No, Gans, I think you did a great job, and you had the blog post link to too. That's perfect.
I love it. I love it. I will push you guys though, because there was a question that came up around cross-platform DBT mesh around data governance. So there's concerns about how that might work. What are your thoughts?
Oh gosh, governance is it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. We're doing a governance next Tuesday. Here in the US. Yeah. The election. It's governance. I don't know. I'll give you my best interpretation and the thing I probably think about a lot, but the thing I think about the most, not a complete answer to the question of like governance. Lineage is a really big part of it. Knowing where your data came from, the quality, the freshness, again, stuff like acceptable use or what's PII or otherwise sensitive. And that's one of the places where I think DBT is really well suited to manage lineage across, if we talk about a DBT mesh paradigm in general, we're going to do this across multiple different DBT projects. And I think at Coalesce, we showed off some examples how to do this with, Redshift and Athena, for example, with one of our customers. So lineage gets you pretty far. It doesn't get you all the way there, but knowledge of like where did this data point come from and how is it defined and what does it mean is, I think, a lot of the battle. So exciting stuff like column level lineage in DBT Cloud or just table lineage in general ends up being a big part of that story.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
To be continued. To be continued. All right. A couple more really great questions here. We're going to make sure we get you guys out before the top of the hour. Thank you for contributing. You guys are so super engaged. Really appreciate all of the insights and the comments. Sounds like Jenna might be starting a book club soon. Thank you, Jenna, for all the recommendations. All right. Here's another question. Are there any aspects of DBT Copilot that are currently using Gen AI that you plan on shifting back to deterministic methods? This is a DBT CodeGen cheerleader who's posted this question. So what are your thoughts? Any Gen AI we're currently using that you might actually plan on shifting back to deterministic methods?
I don't know. Determinism is pretty passe. I think we're doing stochastic now. I don't know. Let me think. There's definitely some. Here's probably the best answer I can give you. A lot of the things that I'm most excited to build are 95% deterministic and procedural and 5% LLMs as an interface. I think a failure mode for trying to build stuff with LLMs is like thinking that everything about it needs to be AI in some way. It actually turns out that just like building really good user experiences matters the most. And sometimes the answer is to just sprinkle a little LLM on the top. Not always. We built stuff that is like more substantially driven by LLMs, but these are not committed product things, so don't take me at my word that we'll build these on any timeline. But I'm excited to put more like documentation in the IDE, like DBT's documentation. So functions that you can call from the DBT context and their descriptions and call signatures and stuff like that. And 95% of that is probably procedural and deterministic, and maybe 5% is like tying it into your workflow a little bit more nicely. So that's just one example.
Love that. I love that. Jenna had a thought, by the way, just very briefly, going back to the governance topic. She mentioned in the chat that automated governance across the mesh will be benefited by a higher level of tests, building off a project evaluator, but focusing on how projects are allowed to interact. So interesting thoughts there around the governance topic. Yeah, maybe we need to do a session on governance because there's lots of interest there. Good stuff. Nitesh would like to know, do you see DBT adding in observability and notifications as part of the offering?
Well, I'll tell you that we have notifications currently in DBT Cloud. They are sort of job level today, and then you could do webhooks for more complicated stuff if you need to. Observability is another pretty big space, and I'll just say it's like a domain that we have an incredible amount of respect for. I think that we know there's opportunity for us to like help identify users about errors more quickly and with more relevant information. And I think we're pretty excited to do stuff like that. But in terms of the whole field of observability, it's quite a large one. And just one that we respect how challenging a problem that is, and what a great job some of our partners out in the world have done.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, Gans, I'd love your thoughts on this one, and this one might be a little bit controversial, but I want to see how you're going to handle this one. So there's a question that there's increasing noise in the data space about new tools that do this thing or that thing that DBT might not currently do. So they're asking, how do we think about the overarching philosophy of DBT, and what's the guiding light for what goes native versus what's left possible? If you wanted to ask it another way, how is DBT Labs thinking about simplicity versus complexity? So kind of a philosophical question here.
It's an awesome question. And this is something that we've spent a ton of time thinking about. Really, it's like one of the things that we've discussed a ton over the past couple of years is what should DBT do, and what should DBT not do. And so when we talk about DBT and DBT core, we talk about DBT as the standard for data transformation. And when we are bringing functionality into DBT core, we want to make sure that it is functionality that is going to be a durable part of the standard that we're using for years. I talk about I expect my kids to be writing DBT unit tests, so we got to make sure to get them right. And so I think part of that has been we have been deliberate about what goes into the standard. And I'll pull up a post that Jeremy Cohen and myself published earlier this year on so it's on what goes titled "What Goes into Core and What Goes into Cloud," but it's really about what DBT is trying to do, and we are trying to create a tool that allows organizations worldwide to enable their data practitioners to do greater work in it, and to be able to have the tooling that lets them solve those problems. But we're not trying to solve every problem, and we think that one tool actually should not try and solve every single problem in an entire domain. So we are focused on kind of building the solution that is going to serve the mission of DBT. That being said, it's so great that there's incredible amount of data tooling getting created for practitioners. I've been loving the enthusiasm across the industry, having smart people looking at important problems, trying to figure out how to do things better. It's how technology progresses. It's how the discipline progresses. So it's nothing but good for all of us as far as I'm concerned.
So you're saying you're anti Lord of the Rings, Gans?
One
ring to rule them all. Blasphemy.
I did get a comment on one of my LinkedIn posts when I was posting about one DBT, and an old college friend of mine said one DBT to rule them all, and I thought that was funny, and I was going to Photoshop the DBT logo over Sauron's eye, but I never got around to doing it. So let's all pretend I've done that, and it was funny.
I love it. We've got 6 minutes. I'm going to get you out in 4. 2 more questions. Drew, Why will you not accept Gans's LinkedIn connection request? I mean, at this point, it's
Yeah.
what are we
Sorry,
doing?
who you said Jason? Which Jason? Jason Ganz? You said? I don't know
The
if I know him.
Gans, the one and only.
Jason Ganz. From what? Like from school or who? I don't know. I don't never heard of a Jason
Oh my
Ganz before in my
gosh.
life.
Actually, from work. From work.
Drew is the
Jason
most
Diggs? I remember
LinkedIn
Jason Diggs.
antisocial.
Who's Jason Ganz?
Oh
What
my
team?
goodness.
Marketing?
Speaking of trustworthy. All right, so I promised I would show my Halloween costume. But you guys got to share some of your favorite Halloween costumes as kids in the chat real quick. If I'm going to do this big reveal, I didn't grow up in a place that celebrated Halloween, so my costume game is very, very lame. Um, I love the creativity Drew brought to his costume. You guys got that, right? For the people who joined late, can you guess what Drew? You're looking at Drew's Halloween costume right now. Drew, you got to add the motions for him. Give him a chance. Give him a hint. See if you can figure out as we wrap. Drew, yes, he is trapped
Let me out.
He's trapped in a spreadsheet. We've all been there. Folks, we're about to wrap up the community AMA. You guys have been great sports. You all have been great sports for hanging out with us today. We do this every month. We hang out here. We hang out in Slack as well. So the party doesn't stop. Keep the questions coming if we didn't get to your questions, and the comments as well. Jenna, thank you for the suggestion about the book club. I will take you up on that. If there's interest, let's do it. Be sure to join your local Slack channel. There's a lot of energy going on right now, especially post Coalesce. So don't be a stranger. Don't do this by yourself. There's lots of people, maybe also trapped in spreadsheets, who would love to hang out and commiserate with you. Any final words as we wrap up the month of October? Gans, Drew, final words.
Okay, so for those of you in the audience, for 8 years, I have been trying to get one Drew Banin to accept my LinkedIn connection. And this very moment, we've had a LinkedIn request come in. Now, my question for the chat, do we accept it?
Kids, only you can break this curse. I feel myself fading away into nothingness. Make the right choice, Gans, and thank you both. This was a lot of fun hanging out with you today. Remember me.
It's
Somebody
done.
help us out.
Done.
My Halloween costume, folks. I'm LeBron James. It's a basketball.
It's pretty good.
It was a lot better in my head before I said it out loud. Thank you for being here, everybody. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out with me on my very first community AMA. Drew Banin, Jason Ganz. Thank you very much to the amazing Amada Echeverria helping out in backstage. We appreciate you all. We'll see you in Slack. Bye for now.
Wait. Oliver, well, if you ask your question on Slack, we'll try and get to it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. See y'all later. Go trick-or-treating tonight.